gremlin on the road.
Go back!
So this story starts in Dorchester Square, where the Sun Life building stands today. That was the site of the first Golden Mile house, the Beaver Hall. Of course, it wasn't called the Golden Mile then, and it wasn't actually even a district. How it happened is about 30 years after the English conquest, Montreal began to grow and industrialize. The first wave of English and Scottish immigrants who arrived in the 1780s had by then made their truckloads of money, and they didn't want to live in the houses that were squeezed into the dirty, noisy city between some factories and workshops and brooks brimming with sewage. Oh no, monsieur. They needed a better life. Where there was space to build fantastic mansions was north of the city, and so it started creeping towards the mountain, up from Dorchester Square. Then called Uptown or Newtown, it peaked in the 1880s, when it is said, I've been unable to find a source for this, but it's an often repeated statement, so I'll repeat it as well. Something like 70% of all capital in Canada lived here, on this 1 square mile effectively, between 1870 and say 1910. Today, maybe a fifth of the buildings survive, many in not the greatest of shapes. And this outfit exemplifies why. The first generation of Golden Milers made their money in fur trade. The second generation was railway and telephones and mail and ships and generally transportation. The third generation was nothing at all. They just inherited the money and enjoyed the life. Well, after the First World War, they got hit by income taxes, inheritance taxes, and then by the Great Depression, and these houses were really difficult to maintain, and especially to heat in the winter. Now, my house is nowhere near as fantastic, but it's about the same age and built in the same technology, and trust me, I wouldn't want to live in it if I had to use coal fires in fireplaces. In 1813, James McGill left his house, the Burnside Hall, extensive swaths of land both sides of today's Sherbrooke Street, which was then St. Mary's Street, and £10,000 of good English money to the Educational Authority of Quebec to set up a college. Of course, it wasn't Quebec then, it was Lower Canada. Well, it took the authority almost 20 years before the first classes started. The first college building only opened in 1833, and it was appalling. So all this is to say that up until late 1850s, when they finally got a principal who could run the place, McGill's, today one of the top universities in Canada, if not the top, did not exactly hit the ground running. Nevertheless, most of the Golden Mile buildings are within or around the campus, and many of those that are outside the campus have been donated to or purchased by McGill over the years, and so are university buildings. First stop for a person. Big fan of Simon McTavish. In short, Simon was sharp and tough and clever. He made a lot of money, very successful man. Then he got married. Or you already know this is not going to end well. Simon bought an awful lot of land and began to build his castle. A house to beat all the houses in Montreal. They're hands-on supervising the construction, and just as the building was finished on the outside and the outfitting on the inside began, well, he spent, I don't know, one chilly night too many on the site. Got a cold, then pneumonia, and insured rather than moving into the castle. He moved into McTavish Monument, a large tomb, a little further up the slope that is still in place today. And what of the castle, you'll ask? It was never finished, but McTavish supposedly haunted it for the next 50 years, or it was only demolished in the 1860s. He was variously reported dancing on the roof, gargling in remembrance of his last illness, or sledging down the slope in his coffin. McTavish Monument has been recently, well, a decade ago, excavated, and it doesn't seem to have brought Simon back, which personally I find is a bit of a shame. That's a bit old, that was 1860s, I think. Okay, so we're moving to the second generation of Golden Milers, of whom Hugh and Andrew Allen, two brothers, were prime example. Today, Hugh is the more famous of the two. It was Andrew and not Hugh who bought the plot with McTavish House still standing on it, and, you know, Simon's ghost presumably living there. So, you know, who's got the guts? But it is Hugh's house that survived. There's one rule on our holidays. There has to be steps. And as far as steps goes, these are really good. Wonderful view. Can you see me?
And the pole is colored. Would you like to live in this outhouse?
Yeah. Okay, I'll have that.
You have that?
Yeah.
Back to the mirror.
Also have that. You see, I had no idea what I'm looking at. It's just I love Art Deco. Well, since then I've researched and I know that Corbusier was a famous architect, best known for his public buildings in Quebec, several of which are still standing. This was his house that he designed for himself and lived here for several decades. Afterwards, it was the home of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and it remains in the family. One of the sons still lives there, I understand.
So you know who lives there, right?
No.
Well, that Pierre Trudeau used to live there. It's the Cormier house.
And, as you could hear, this nice man in a very stylish fedora hat told me all that, only I was so distracted at that time and so much did not expect the name of Trudeau that I completely missed it. Basically won the title of the Village Idiot of the Year right there. This to me is one of the saddest stories of the Golden Mile. It used to be called Rosemount. It was built in the 1870s for John Rose, who was a prominent lawyer and politician back then. It was considered grand enough to be offered as lodging to the Prince of Wales when he came to visit Canada and Montreal in 1860. The house was completely refurbished and renovated at the government expense, and through a chain of ownership it ended up with one Percy Walters, who in the 1940s gave it to the city, and the city didn't have the money to maintain it, didn't have an idea what to do with it either, and so they just demolished it. And here we turn towards Sherbrooke, thereby missing several more old houses, but while I can seldom get enough, there is only so much that a granny can take in a day. Right, so this is Ritz-Carlton, built in 1912, the brainchild of Charles Hosmer. Hosmer was another very interesting golden miner who rose from quite humble beginnings as a telegraphist. His idea, after the success of the Ritz Hotel in Paris, he was a friend of César Ritz, was to open one franchise in Montreal. It was a smashing success right from the start, the greatest hotel, the last grand hotel built before the wars, and also In the 1920s, 1930s, when the Golden Mile began to disappear, when people went out of business, lost their fortunes, lost their houses, some of the Golden Milers, those who obviously still had the money to pay for it, took rooms in the Ritz as their primary residence. So basically, you know, they lost the mansions, so they had to go and rough it permanently in the Ritz. Makes me well up. I think it's a squirrel, it's Ulysses.
People still working. doctor's offices.
What are you doing now?
Montreal City.
Montreal City.